My name is Johnnie Marion Washington. My title is Bishop. I was born in Paris, Texas, and my mother moved here when I was 6 months old, so El Paso is my home. I was raised here, but I went to school in Arizona because the schools here were segregated, and my mother didn't want me going to a segregated school, so she sent me to Arizona, and I went all the way through to the 10th grade in Arizona, and I had to come here to help my mother with the cafe because she had a cafe. And when I got here, my school score was so high until I guess Arizona was much higher than Texas because it wasn't segregated. And so I was in the 10th grade when I came here, but they graduated me, and I was 13 years old when I graduated.
What was the name of the school?
Douglas.
Douglas. So you
It
were
was the only school then that blacks could go to, so they had the elementary and the high school.
so after high school, what was your life like here in El Paso?
Well, after high school, I was working with my mother in the cafe, and she wanted me to go to school because she wanted me to have a higher education. So she sent me back to Arizona. So I went to the University of Arizona, and I got my bachelor's from there. And then I saw that I could go to school online and still work in the cafe. So I registered with New York State Board of Regents, and I got my master's degree from them.
What was your bachelor's and master's degrees in?
My bachelor's was in English. My master's was in counseling, and I got my doctorate in theology.
Doctorate in theology. So you were mentioning about the cafe. So during that time, were there a lot of Black-owned businesses?
Quite a few, because we couldn't go into the white businesses, so blacks had to open their own businesses, so they did.
And during that time, how was your mom treated as a Black business owner?
My mother was half Cherokee Indian, so she was accepted wherever she went because she they didn't know what she was.
Okay. So how was that for you?
Well, I was treated kind of rough, but I gave back just as much as I got. So people started realizing that this little woman would protect herself.
Okay. So as a young woman here in El Paso, tell us what your life was like.
Well, I guess it was fine because I didn't have any problems because people were really afraid of my mother because she would fight a bear and the bear wouldn't win.
Okay. So she had it a little bit easier than some who were identified as Black.
Yes. Well, the white folks liked my mother and they loved her cooking. She had a catering business and I helped her with that. And she had a lawyer, and her lawyer also had a father who was a judge. So people didn't want to bother my mother because she had good contact.
And after you worked with her in the cafe, what did you do?
Well, she sent me back to Arizona to school.
And after you finished school there and came back here,
Well, I got married,
okay.
and then I was traveling all over the world, first in the United States and then over in Germany.
Okay. So you married someone who was in the military?
Yes.
Okay. So and you ended up coming back here with the military?
Yes.
Okay. So coming back here, what time frame was that when you came back?
It was in the 60s.
So having had left and come back, how did you feel El Paso had grown, if any, when it came to?
Yes, it had grown quite a bit.
Okay.
But we knew it was going to grow because a lot of military people were retiring here because it was so nice and cost of living here was lower than other places. You could buy homes here for a whole lot cheaper than you could other places. So a lot of the military retired here.
Okay. And you stayed here from then, when you came back from Germany?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you've been here steadily working here in El Paso since the 60s.
Yes, and then I went to nursing school.
Okay. Did you go to nursing school here in El Paso?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So you're a nurse? You do a little bit of everything.
Yes, I was a nurse.
Okay. So back in the 60s, and from what we know and understand, you were really heavily involved in the community, from
civil rights.
Yes, for civil rights.
Yes.
So tell us about your work with civil rights here in El Paso.
Well, for one thing, El Paso was really prejudiced, and I didn't like the fact that my hometown was so prejudiced, so I fought against it. So I fought everything. I fought the banks, post office, the police department, the sheriff department, everything. I fought everything, and I won every case.
Uh-oh. Were you a part of any organizations back then?
I was president of the NAACP for 22 years.
For 22 years. So as president of the NAACP for that long, what have you seen? And I know you fought a lot for people. Can you tell us some of those instances where you've had to fight for others as well as yourself?
Well, the blacks working in the post office was not getting the same pay as the whites in the same grade. So when I found that out, a couple of the employees came to me and told me how bad they were being treated. So I took their cases and I won that. And then I noticed when I go into the bank, I wouldn't see any black tellers, but their money was in the bank, and so I asked to talk to the president of the bank. And he told me he didn't feel like blacks was educated enough. And I laughed at him because I said, probably some black woman raised you. I say, and because you the man you are because of some black woman. I said, because most white folks had a black maid to raise their kids. And he said, well, yes, I did have a nanny. I said, your nanny made you the man you are. I said, but I'm going to fight you and you're going to put some black tellers in here. I'm going to have them draw their money out.
And how did that go?
Well, I had to get some people that had money to take their money out. And what they found out was a lot of black people had a lot of money in the banks. Because blacks back when I was coming up, they were not on welfare. See, now we got this welfare thing. Blacks worked. They didn't want welfare. And so blacks had money. When blacks started pulling their money out of the banks realized that they could go broke easily. So they had to hire some black tellers. It was as simple as that.
So because of your work, that could be one of the reasons why we have black bank tellers today here in El Paso.
That is the reason. Ain't that one of the reasons? That is the reason. Okay.
Okay. Okay. So what are some of the other issues that black people face that you had to stand up for?
Well, bus drivers. We had black bus drivers, but they wasn't getting the pay that the white bus drivers was getting. And some of them had more seniority than the white bus drivers, but they were still getting low income. So when they came to me, I took their case and I won that too. I don't want to boast because God was with me all the way. I wouldn't take a case until I prayed and asked God whether I should take it. If he told me to take it, I knew I was going to win it. If he told me not to take it, I knew it wasn't no need of me trying to take it, and I would let the people know I can't help you. But every case I took, I won. There was a program starting, Dr. Samuel Self, he was a doctor at the El Paso Community College, and he had a program It was called a pilot program where he had very advanced students working. And I had two of my students from my church was in that program. These were two young girls, and the program consisted of high math all the way up to trig. And these two girls passed each one of those tests, and so he had them working with him with that prep school. And because of that, a whole lot of blacks was able to get, jobs that they wouldn't have gotten because they were able to pass those math tests. Because the SAT score to even get into college was kind of high, and most black wasn't passing it. And it wasn't because they was ignorant; it was because the test was set up to cause them to fail. Because most blacks didn't know a whole lot about art, and they had a lot of questions about art. So what I did is I got one of the tests, and I studied it, and I saw how it was fixed to cause blacks to fail. So what I did is I went and got all the information on art that I could get. The NAACP paid for it. And we started teaching those kids about the art. That way they was able to pass the test and could get into college.
And you did that through the NAACP?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So in addition to the NAACP, I mean, before we go there, I know you mentioned God. Tell us about that. When did you give your life to Christ, and when did you
November the 1st, 1968, at 9:15 p.m. on a Friday.
Okay. And since then, you became a pastor and active in the community.
Well, God told me he wanted me to build a church. And I laughed because I didn't know about building no church. And he said, don't worry, I'll show you step by step how to build a church. And so I did build a church at 4631 Atlas. The building still stands. But because of that building, a lot of people came to the church, got saved, filled with the Holy Ghost. And I had one of the largest choirs in the city. So even the city council would ask me to bring my choir to sing at all these big things that they would have, like they had the prayer breakfast. Mm-hmm. The mayor was in charge of the prayer breakfast, but he would call me and say, Reverend Washington, we want your church to come and sing for us. And I said, okay. And the same with Fiesta over there in McKellican County. Mm-hmm. We would go and sing there too. So my church was well known throughout, well, not just in El Paso, it was well known throughout Texas.
And what was the name of your church?
Full Gospel Evangelist Temple.
And when did you become a bishop?
In 2004.
When it comes to the church and the church's involvement with the community from when you grew up here in El Paso, how do you relate that from then to now in the churches and how they are in the community?
Well, when I was coming up, the church folk were really church folk. They had one foot over in the world and one foot, well, the preachers were really preachers. Pastors were pastors. They wasn't going to liquor stores and buying bottles and hiding their hand. I'm sorry, but nowadays we have pastors drinking more than the folks in the world. We didn't have that when I was coming up.
Do you believe that pastors now would listen to pastors from back then, like you now, to seek advice on how to better lead congregations and be active in the community?
I think they were looking for money, and money became their religion. They wasn't interested in saving souls. They were interested in having X number of members to have X amount of dollars. So a lot of people in the church, they're not even saved. They're just churchgoers, bench warmers.
That brings me back to with you being active in the NAACP and in the community and standing up for people. That's a little bit different than what's happening now. Because we hear that a lot of people ask for you still when it comes to things relating to racism or being treated unfairly. And even though you haven't been the leader of the NAACP in a long time, people still ask for you. Why do you think that is?
Because they went to the NAACP and they didn't get no answer, no help. These people just want titles, put it on. They want something to put on their bio. You know, I was president of NAACP. I go on the bio. They look good. They don't want to do no work.
So what advice can you give the various chapters of the NAACP to once again be more active in the community and be there for those who need them?
I don't try to advise those folks because they think they have more education and more wisdom than I have because they driving big cars and everything. I got big houses and I got an apartment. Okay.
As far as describing leadership, how would you describe that now?
What leadership?
Do you believe there are Black leaders here in the community?
They got Black people that's got positions, but I don't see them helping anybody. In my church, my pastor, we're under Bishop Juan O. Lawson, who is my father in the gospel. I got saved and filled with the Holy Ghost under him. And he is a leader because he was over the physics department at UTEP. So you know he's brainy, very brainy. But I know he's saved. And he teaches men how to truly be men. I can't high-tie to no man. I high-tie to God. That's it.
So
I can't let a man tell me when to sit, when to stand, when to open my mouth. That's not happening with me. And everybody know that. I'm my own self woman.
and you're full of wisdom. And I know, just like I just asked you, if people asked you for advice, or if you were to give some advice, you probably wouldn't. But if they asked, would you then share with them some thoughts on how they?
Yeah, and I let them know that what I'm telling them they're not gonna like in the first place, because I can see through them, and I know sometimes they're their own worst enemy, and you have to let people know that. Mm-hmm. In order for them to correct whatever their problem is, you got to tell them the truth. Right. And sometimes they are their problem.
I understand.
And I love people, so I tell them the truth.
And I think that's what's missing from society today. Some people don't want to tell the truth out of fear of what people may think.
Well, I fear God. That's all I fear.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to take a step back again to your upbringing and being raised here. Were there ever some situations that you've been through that were just really sad, or that you think about today that you wish could have been different?
I don't know of any, because my mother was such a straight up person. She gonna tell you the truth too. She raised me that way, and because of my mother, a whole lot of people walked around me because of my mother. They didn't want to face my mother.
This is MLK weekend, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. weekend. And from what we understand, you started founded the MLK Committee here in El Paso.
Me and Leona Washington, yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that and why you started the committee here?
Well, when I came from Germany, I noticed they didn't have MLK here, and I couldn't understand that because MLK had done so much, not just for Black folks, but the civil rights, the civil rights action that came about because of him, it helped everybody become able to have their civil rights. And see, Hispanics wasn't getting their civil rights either until Martin Luther King started marching, you see. So when I came and found out he didn't have a chapter here, I called Leona because Leona was well known here in the city too, and we decided to form one, and that's what we did. It was October of '68. It was to try to help restore people, get people to realize that you can't sit down on civil rights. You got to keep working on it. You can't just let it lay. You got to keep working.
So for those who believe that we're past that now, we're not.
No, we're not.
Can you explain a little bit more about that and why you feel that way?
Well, I guess what I'm going to say now is going to hurt somebody's feeling, but because a lot of our people are now on welfare, they don't feel they have to do nothing or say nothing because a check gonna come in the mail, okay? So they don't worry about civil rights. All they want is that check and food stamps. We had to get the word out that we have to fight for more than welfare checks and food stamps.
So we're still in their fight when it comes to civil rights. What do you believe that we could do differently, especially those of us who may be new to El Paso or weren't here in the 60s or 70s and who feel that there are no racism issues? There are a lot of Black people here who believe that there is no racism here, no issues. How can we best involve those people and get them to understand that we still have civil rights issues here that we have to be aware of?
Well, we still have a Martin Luther King Committee, a second Tuesday of every month. What they need to do is join the Martin Luther King Committee so they can find out what they need to do.
But I just want you to take the time to share a message, any message you would like to the citizens of El Paso, especially Black people.
Well, I would like to say to Black people that the people of your past, you need to stand on their shoulders, which means you need to get educated to what's going on truly in this world and not just sit back and think everything is going to happen for you. You got to make stuff happen. And in order to make stuff happen, you have to have education. You got to know what's going on in order to correct it. In other words, you got to start working yourself. Nothing comes easy. And nobody's going to give you anything, even that check you're getting. Some of us who had houses, our taxes was raised so you could get that welfare check. That was another reason why I felt I should get out of my house, because I got tired of enabling people.
And for a message to the clergy or the Christian leaders here in El Paso, what message do you have for them?
That there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and it's not in the pulpit. You need to take your message outside also. There's a lot of people out there don't go to church. And what we used to do, they call it the Devil's Triangle. And a whole lot of my members of my church came from the Devil's Triangle because I used to go over there pass out pampers, and I even took food over there to help them. I wanted them to know I cared about them. And so they need to start going out in these places and trying to help these people to know that they are needed in the churches. You know, our churches have gotten where we're kind of satisfied, and we don't go outside of our little area.
Yeah.
Jesus didn't have an area. He went everywhere. We need to do the same thing.
And for the Black community here in El Paso, what would you say to them about being involved with politics or being represented, whether it's on the school board or city council? What would you say to those in the community who are Black?
I would say they need to start observing what's going on, and they need to take a stand and start working for whatever it is that they're sitting and complaining about. Stop complaining and start working towards getting whatever it is you're complaining about. That's what we did.
Are there any people from you growing up here that you remember who were actively involved in the community that we can share with others as an example of what leadership and being involved means?
General Greer, of course, Bishop Lawson. It's kind of hard for me to, because most of the ones that were really working hard in the civil rights movement are gone on home to be with Jesus now. I think I'm the last one left.
Well, we truly appreciate you, and we truly appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. And while we have you here, we want to glean from you, and we want you to share your wisdom with us so that we can move forward, but rightfully. So is there anything else you would like to share with us?
Well, I would like to say, once again, try to come to the Martin Luther King Committee meetings, because they can get information there on what they need to do, because that's what the Martin Luther King Committee is all about. I would also say to the preachers, their job is also to go outside of their pulpit and try to let people know that they're going to stand for what is right. And they're going to stand up. They're going to stand up and tell folks what needs to be told. Because sitting in your own pulpit is not helping your people. People out there going hungry, don't have places to stay. Something needs to be done about that. And it's left up to us to do it.
Well, I appreciate you for taking the time. I just wanted the community to hear from you, and to be able to see that we have our own living legends here in this city that have a lot to share, for us to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, to not blame others, but be active and do something ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.